10 years ago, my recollections were much more sharp.
Today is April 11th, 1975, and I'm interviewing Rabbi Stern, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. That's Rabbi Seymour Stern.
Correct.
When and where did you first encounter Jewish survivors of the Holocaust? Who were these people? Were they concentration camp victims or individuals who hid during the war?
I think the first contact we had with survivors was in Belgium. We landed in Le Havre and went by 48, freight train, to Namur, Belgium.
Right.
And we made contact with some of the Jewish people there. I don't recall how they had been liberated, but I do remember, this you may have already had from some of the other chaplains who were there at that time. There were some children who had been rescued by the local priest, Father Andre.
Right. This is a story
the story you've already heard.
I've heard from Rabbi Harold Saperstein. Is that right?
Saperstein wasn't in our group.
Oh, well then did you take it too?
Hasbro wasn't in our group.
I'm trying to remember Namur exactly.
Well, it was a different time. We arrived in December. There may have been others who passed through before.
Yeah, fine. Anyway.
Anyway, for example, Rabbi Friedman was there, Rabbi Joseph Miller, and Rabbi Irving Gans. And that's why I wanted the list, so I shouldn't miss anybody in the group. I remember we had dinner with one family, and they already had a little place where they had religious services, and they had a sign on the door, American Jury has given their all. Now you too must contribute. Yeah? I remember a lady who told us that during the German occupation they had, I think, used potatoes carved out potatoes to make a Hanukkah menorah, and so they could light candles. And we visited the priest, Father Andre. We tried to get together a little fund to buy him a new cassock. And we interviewed him, and I remember asking him, I was the only one who could speak some French, whether he thought there was any future for the Jews in Belgium, and he didn't think so. He thought that their place was in Israel or Palestine, and I asked him why, and he said they stick out to a greater degree. So that was our first experience.
Now,
we went to Brussels during that week, and there were Jewish people already around the railway station, ready to do business, exchange money or whatever, black market, I suppose.
Mm.
And,
now,
you want to ask me some specific questions?
yes, well, what I'm interested in...
Those were the first people we met.
You mentioned that meaning that...
there were a group of chaplains who came on one ship and on two separate boats.
And you were all in Namur at the same time?
That was a replacement depot.
And you were all at that point, and you saw these refugees, DPs at that point in Namur, all together, Gans and...
Yes.
I see.
Afterwards, we all were moved out to Germany and Austria, and Chaplain Miller, Joseph Miller, remained behind. He was stationed in New York for a while.
Right.
You spoke with him.
Right, yeah.
So he may have given you some of this information already.
Now, what type of help were you able to give to the...
Well, we didn't stay very long. He remained.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him giving orders to a German prisoner of war in Yiddish when he was cleaning up the room, and the German understood.
Were you prepared for what you saw in Europe in terms of the Jewish situation?
Of course, we knew what to expect.
You did, because
Yeah.
many of the chaplains told me that they did not.
Oh, yes. Why shouldn't they have? What do you mean?
Well, what I'm trying
We
to...
knew there were concentration camps. We knew that there had been...
Many people suggest that they had no inkling as to what type of situation that they would encounter in terms of survivors. They weren't sure that there would be survivors or there wouldn't be survivors. After all, the role of the American Jewish chaplain was he was there to help the soldiers, the American soldiers.
Right, yeah.
And it was only as an added duty that they took upon themselves. That
almost all of us were very much concerned and anxious to help in any way we could.
So in other words, you came over with the expectation, just telling me, that you would...
We would help if there were any way we could help, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember on board ship, a Protestant chaplain, one of the Protestant chaplains was anxious to help children too. He was collecting some candy for children, for the German children.
Mm-hmm.
Not for the French children, not for the Belgian children, not for the Jewish children, but for the German children. This is a chaplain from the South, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Protestant chaplain.
So you weren't really able to do very much for the Jews in Namur or in Brussels?
In Brussels, we just went for a day to see Brussels, which was already active. This was already in December. It was quite a time after the liberation.
Right. Now, when did you next encounter a group where you were able to help?
And we returned, well, I'm not saying we were able to help. We were just getting acquainted with the situation. And in general, the people we found were already helping themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been told that?
To a certain degree.
In general, I would say that...
By the time you arrived in December of 1945,
people were on their own.
people in Namur, people in Brussels were on their own.
They were established in terms of...
They didn't call upon you to do anything.
No, I think that one group that arrived the day before us had gone to see some people and told us that they were in a difficult situation and tried to raise a little funds for them. But it didn't amount to anything. We didn't stay in Namur very long, and in Brussels we just went, we met the Jewish chaplain who was stationed in Brussels, and Brussels was already a bustling city. If you had the list, I would be able to tell you. From Chicago.
Rabbi Gorella, he's from Detroit?
No, it wasn't for relic. No. If you had the list, I could check it out.
Okay, fine.
It was former rabbis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now your next...
And from there we went to Paris, and we met some of the Jewish people there. We even ate in a Jewish restaurant. There was already a kosher restaurant in Paris, and around the Church of the Notre Dame, there were Jewish people also ready to sell things and buy things, both European Jews and Algerian Jews, and there was some semblance of normality. No more. The situation had already been stabilized. Well, there was the elevators in the buildings didn't run. There was power shortage, things of that sort. But the people, we saw Jewish people already traveling in the subway, and they didn't seem to be in any great suffering at that time. Those who were gone were gone. There were no rabbis. We went to visit the Rothschild synagogue. Services were going on. We were told that the doors had been blown out. Had been an explosion at the doors of the synagogue sometime before during the occupation, but that had already passed too. And those who were there were getting along. And were in business. From there we went to Frankfurt, and that was the headquarters.
Right.
And in Frankfurt we were separated. Rabbi Miller was stayed in Belgium, and the rest of us went to Germany, and I think one or two went to Rabbi Goldenberg, who was killed in an accident, went to Austria, and I went to Munich.
What did you do there?
There I was a Jewish chaplain for the military government.
Mm-hmm. Did you work with Rabbi Klausner?
Yes, he was already there for a short time, and he was active with the Jewish committee. And at that time he was, I think he was transferred to Berlin. Apparently he was not in the good graces of the military. And the very first experience I had was the morning I arrived. This was between Christmas and New Year's. We had been in Paris on Christmas. And between Christmas and New Year's, the Protestant chaplain came to visit me and warned me against having anything to do with the Jewish DPs.
Do you remember who that was?
I have it on record. I can find out the name for you.
This is very important.
And shortly thereafter, as soon as I reported, I was called to see the general in command of the military government, this was so-called Lucky Rear. The Third Army was divided into two parts, Lucky Rear and Lucky Forward. Lucky Forward was stationed in Bad Tölz, and Lucky Rear was in Munich, and Lucky Rear became military government. And Lucky Forward was headquarters Third Army.
Now this Protestant chaplain told you not to get involved with the DPs. Was he your boss?
No. It was just a friendly warning, but right thereafter I was called to see the General Walter Mueller.
It's M-U-E-L-L-E-R.
He was in charge of the military government, and I received a similar warning from him.
So he warned you not to get involved with the...
He warned, that's right.
And did you heed his warning?
No. The very first thing I did was to try to find the Joint Distribution Committee and the Jewish Committee, Central Committee for Liberated Jews in Germany. Is it on Moorstrasse?
It was on Sieberstrasse.
On Sieberstrasse. 3?
Mm.
No.
13? The Deutsches Museum.
No, it had been in the Deutsches Museum. It had been in the Deutsches Museum, but I think it was on Sieberstrasse, 13.
No, okay.
13, and then there was Meerstrasse, 2.
Mm-hmm.
There was two little streets. I have the map of Munich if you are interested. And I got in touch with the committee. Chaplain Klausner was already working with him. He was not the first chaplain to have worked with him. I don't know exactly when he arrived in Munich, and he was attached to, I think, to the 91st General Hospital in Munich. And at that time they were concerned about how to rescue Jewish children who had been left with Poles in Poland. The committee was active already, and it had its own officers, Dr. Galman Greenberg, and I had an office on the Tegernseer Landstrasse.
How would you spell it?
Tegernseer Landstrasse. Tegernsee, which was the office of the military government for Bavaria. General Miller was the commanding general of the Office of Military Government for Bavaria, OMGB.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told you're here to serve the Jewish troops. And this, the DPs are not sure.
Was this anti-Semitism on the part of the general, or was it just...
No, I think that this was the policy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was policy to a certain degree, but there were chaplains that obviously didn't agree with it and went on their own.
Yes.
And they didn't have any difficulty from the general. Did you have any problems from the general once you found out that obviously you were not adhering to what he had, his guidelines?
I was transferred to Nuremberg.
Because of that?
I think, well, there was some anti-Semitic incident. A drunken officer had been one night a Jewish doctor who had been a German refugee, and I were in a bus. You see, we had the offices at the OMGB on Tegenstrasse, and the military mess was in the Haus der Deutschen Kunst, which was a very beautiful building. You've heard of it? And on the way home, on the way back to headquarters, there was a drunken officer started to rant about Jews, and too bad they didn't melt them all down and back out. And the medical officer, Dr. Elias, and I put in a complaint. So as a result of which, this officer, who apparently had a good record as an officer of the line, was fined a paltry sum in German marks, which didn't amount to anything. Dr. Elias returned home. He was just at the end of his duty, and I was moved to Nuremberg.
So you really didn't have that much contact with the Jews of Germany,
of Munich? Oh, well, no, we had. We organized the Purim program, which was a very vast success, together with a group of displaced persons and some Jewish GIs. We went around and assembled talent for this first Purim after the liberation. And we went to Landsberg, which was a displaced persons camp, and some other locality. There was a Jewish orchestra, which had some survivors. And we assembled talent for the first Purim in Munich. And then I set about trying to find a suitable location for a Jewish center for the community. And I was assigned a building for that purpose. And I also was assigned a building for a YMHA. That had been a fraternity house for German students. I have quite a few things written down in my diary from that time. I did keep a diary in the form of letters to home, so I can give you names and dates if there's anything specific you want to know. And there were people who came into my office to ask for help in trying to find housing in the community, or to find relatives in the United States. At that time, a lot of Hungarian Jews arrived in Munich. I remember being at the railway station when they arrived, and they were placed in the house, was at the Deutsches Museum. And there was another place called the Funkkaserne. That name, where they, which was off limits. And incidentally, some of these displaced person centers were off limits. So that's right. I had to sort of push my way in. And there you saw people who didn't have very much and were living in primitive conditions. I remember there was a vaudeville team called Block and Sully. Have you ever heard of them? They were very talented. I happened to meet them. They were sent out to entertain the troops, and I took them to the Funkkaserne to see the conditions under which Jewish people were living. And I guess it was Mr. Block and his wife, Mr. Sully, he became so upset that he took off his shirt and gave it to one of the men who... I've never seen anybody take off their shirt for somebody else. I did at that time. So there were grand things we weren't able to do because the main things were being done for the people by, I think, UNRWA. UNRWA was the Jewish welfare program wasn't too active either.
Well, the Jewish Welfare Board...
Not the Jewish Welfare Board. The Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. The Jewish Welfare Board didn't exist there.
Right.
The Jewish Welfare Board had a club in Paris. Incidentally, we did go up to see the Jewish Welfare Board in Paris. It may have been Rabbi Gorelick and in Brussels.
He was there.
Yeah. Was from Chicago?
Well, I know him from Detroit now, but...
Well, I've got two people together, mixed together. At that time, too, we received a warning from Headquarters Third Army not to have anything to do with the displaced person. Who was the rabbi in Headquarters Third Army? All the Jewish chaplains were called together in Bad Tolz, T-O-L-Z. And we received a printed a form letter advising us not. I may even have a copy of the form letter somewhere. A number of things that I thought to preserve, I set aside when I moved from New York to California, just the things I wanted to say. I remember I had a telegram from 1946, at this time. Your lulav is on the way, signed McNarney. You know who McNarney was? And I saved that telegram in that stuff. But it's possible that the letter that was sent out to the Jewish chaplains. Do you have a record who was the Jewish chaplain at the Headquarters Third Army at that time?
I don't remember. Could that have been Eichhorn?
No. These men were already gone. Incidentally, at that time, Ben Gurion came to Munich. And they had a big meeting. Are you aware of that?
Sure.
Yeah. And I provided the American flag for the meeting. That was my contribution. So I sort of stole it away from the military government for the day, and I'm sure that Mr. Ben Gurion was not aware of what I had achieved.
So that
well, there were a lot of things we did at that time. I didn't say that that ends it by any means.
Well, what other type
But in terms of getting to know the people, and I said the first place I visited, the first camp I visited was Feldafing. You know Feldafing.
Sure.
Together with Chaplain Klausner. And that day there was a big controversy over who was entitled to the key to the storehouse where they kept provisions. How it was finally settled, I don't know. But some of the main things we did was try to get people in contact with one another in terms of relatives in the States, finding people a place to live.
Did you work with Klausner on Sharika Plata, the 6-volume?
That was already...
well, they were still being published.
I have a copy of it, but it may be that they published others afterwards.
Yeah, they did. The latest one was in 46.
But I would say that as much as the Jewish chaplains did, that the main work of rehabilitation was done by the people themselves. Not by the Joint, and not by the UNRWA, but the people had enough verve and energy, those to recover. And by the time we were arrived, we didn't see those skeletons that you see pictures of on the liberation.
Well, there were
those who died were already gone.
Were you involved in getting packages from the United States and distributing them to survivors?
Not at that time. That was later on. I did get packages from the States when I was stationed in northern Germany.
Fine. Are we finished with the Munich period?
Well, to the extent that we covered it here, yes.
Well, there's nothing else you'd like to tell me about? Some things you were doing. It was a secondary role in the sense that, as you said...
All the chaplains, I think, were in a secondary role. The very first chaplains
were in a primary role, I think.
Provided for critical needs. But this time, UNRWA was functioning. The Joint Distribution Committee, however, did not really start to work until the following year.
Did you have to help?
Supplies.
Did you have to help the
supplies? Provide them with supplies? No. They were already supplied. I would. For example, there was a time, one day I got a visit because they wanted to have a Jewish wedding. And there was a problem with curfew. So I had to go and run around with Mr. Schwimmer With Kapaleko, you know. Have you heard the name already?
Sure.
Yeah. To get permission. I remember with one Jewish officer who didn't want to help at all. He said these people all water on the bridge over the dam.
So you did encounter Jewish GIs that felt that way, or he was atypical?
Well, there weren't too many Jewish GIs.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, many had been already sent home.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, they were not too concerned.
In general, you found it wasn't concerned?
No, there were individuals. I think that the ones in Munich that got involved were German Jewish boys who had been
refugees.
refugees.
That's interesting because most of the chaplains have told me just the opposite, that the GIs that they encountered, Jewish GIs that they encountered, were very helpful. Sometimes...
There were individuals. But,
well, you characterized them as a group. They said that the Jewish GIs that they met were either initiating activities or if the chaplain himself asked them, they'd be more than willing to do all types of things to help.
There weren't that many Jewish GIs.
Okay.
You had to go hunt for a Jewish GI.
Mm-hmm. So amongst those GIs that you knew, there wasn't this tremendous urge to help.
No, I don't think there was, but not on their own, except certain individuals.
Well, even at your own suggestion.
Yeah, well, a simple matter of getting someone to make a curfew easier. The Jewish officer didn't help; it was the Gentile officer.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the permission, and the wedding was held. Fine. So primary needs were taken care of by UNRWA. Right. People were already in business, black market and what have you. Incidentally, there's an interesting book that was published recently by a former Jewish DP who is now a multimillionaire. Nathan Chappelle. He has some references to Chaplain Spiro.
Yeah.
You've seen the book already?
Yeah.
So you know about that.
Again, what was the American Army's reaction to your activities on behalf of the European Jewry? We talked about the
negative. Negative. I remember trying to get permission for Jewish prisoners to get kosher food. Jewish DPs who were prisoners. And it was with difficulty that I got some permission. And then the officer who did give the permission went out of his way to make sure that these Jewish DPs, if they got kosher food, would not get better food than others. And they shouldn't derive any benefit.
Well, this was after the occupation. I mean, this was after many of the combat troops had left, so we were in the second period.
That's right.
And
the replacements were coming in. We were replacement chaplains.
Right. So this was the case in many instances where they were more interested in the German forelines.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the Switzerland.
And they saw the DPs as being pains in the neck.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the replacement period, there weren't so many Jewish GIs because this was already not the army that had to be there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that checks out. Of what I've heard from other people.
I remember working with a Jewish student group. There was an UNRWA university, and there were Jewish students who wanted to get into the University of Munich. Mm-hmm. And I went with them to the chancellor.
I heard about something like that, yeah.
And I did get some help. The UNRWA university didn't last long. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a Rabbi Snieg. He was S-N-I-E-G. He was the rabbi for the Jewish community, the Jewish DP community, I would say. And, I went with him to the ministry to get permission for some recognition that they wanted at that time. I have a little laryngitis today. So I remember asking him about the dignitaries who came from the United States and what they had been able to do to help. And he said, I don't know, but they run down the hall and they're gone before I can talk to them. And so they didn't provide much help. But you did have the Joint Distribution Committee active.
Now, did you work with him in any way?
At that particular point, well, I just got acquainted with them.
Mm-hmm. How long were we talking about in Munich? From what year?
About 2.5 months.
From, what did you say, the end of...
From the end of December until just before Passover.
That's 40...
And I went to Nuremberg, Passover 46. The director of the JDC at that time in Munich was Lady Becker, whose name is not mentioned except in a footnote in the book that was written on the survivors, and the rescuers.
You mean the Redeemers?
The Redeemers. Schwartz.
Leo Schwartz, yeah.
Yeah, no reference to the fact that he was the one who was in charge at that time.
Side 2, side 2, tape 1. What?
I wrote down notes to remember some of the things.
Fine,
But I can't read it.
Oh.
I'd have to sit down for some time and remember.
You were 25 years old at the time.
Yeah. Just 25. I must have been the youngest chaplain in the army. Yeah, from Nuremberg, from Munich, I went to Nuremberg. And main thing I did in Nuremberg was to organize the Passover service. And even there we had problems. In arranging for the Passover service, I wanted to have a kosher Passover. And the Germans offered to provide us with 6 sheep. And
6 sheep or 6?
6 sheep for our Seder, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to get a shirkut from the local Jewish community. It was already some normalization, stabilization. At the last moment, we got an order from the military government that we could not use the German sheep because we would upset the German economy. And the American government didn't want us to live off the German economy.
Mm.
So we did without the kosher sheep and the kosher meat. I gave orders to have fish for the Seder, and they played a trick on them, and they found chicken. But I just mentioned this because it's interesting that the military government did not want us to have.
Now, who's in charge at that point, you know? I mean, these are...
Military government?
Yeah.
That was from Munich, the OMGB.
So it was the same year under his command?
Well, under his command, yes. It may have been a specific...
Well, let me ask you something about the Army. Was it on all levels that you witnessed this...
Well, there were individuals, some people were very benevolent.
On what level were there people that were willing to help or that were sympathetic?
Well, there were people who were sympathetic, but there were, you were asking, one of your questions is about the Protestant Catholic chaplains, whether there was any concern for the Jewish people. I would say nil. They might have been kind, benevolent. As a matter of fact, in arranging for our Seder in Nuremberg, it was through the efforts of the Catholic chaplain, Laval, that we were able to have the Officers Club, which was one of the very few buildings still standing for our Seder. He took an interest in that. And he had influence with General Watson. Is that name?
Yes.
He died only a few weeks ago. He became mayor of Beverly Hills.
What was his first name?
Leroy
Watson.
Leroy Watson. He was in the command of the Nuremberg area.
Because he was also responsible for...
So it's the same attitude. If I wanted to have a Seder, we got help.
In other words, anything for the military, anything for your Jewish GIs...
Well, not anything. I wouldn't say anything.
Well, but I'm saying anything that...
If you want to have a Seder, then you're entitled to have a Seder, and even go so far as to close down the office club, which is something.
Right. In other words,
But
they were willing to go to help you out in terms of.
But as far as concerned for the Jewish displaced persons, So in Nuremberg, number one, we worked with the Seder, the Passover Seder, and then on the outskirts of Nuremberg was the Jewish community, a Jewish DP camp in Fürth. You heard about the Fürth situation?
That's where Spiro was also working.
No, he was not there.
From what I understand.
Spiro was in Bamberg.
Right.
Schweizer, no. I think around Bamberg.
No, so he was in Fürth.
No, he was not in Fürth, definitely not.
Okay.
Klausner came around there at that time on a visit, but not Spiro. During the time that Ben Gurion was in Munich, all the Jewish chaplains in the theater met in Munich, both with the group that had come along about the same time as I did, and others from the Air Force, and those who were just about to go home.
All right, well, let's get back to the question of Nuremberg. Were you able to do anything for this DP camp?
Well, the problem at the DP camp was that just about that time an order came through that all the DPs were to be cleared out. And there was great resistance on the part of the DPs.
Do you remember the name of the camp exactly?
Good?
Yeah.
And the name of the camp? I have it written down.
Okay.
You need to know. It's a long Funkenschlag, I think. Oh, it's not important. Fürth. There was only one. There was an old camp and a new camp. And there were two Funkenschlags, so something like that. One up near Bremerhaven and one in Fürth. And what I was able to do at that time was to alert the press that was covering the Nuremberg trials to what was taking place. And it was considered a publicity at that time. Although, let's say PM, for example, carried that. You're not aware of PM?
Sure, it was in New York.
Yeah, but the New York Times didn't carry the story. The New York Times reporter wrote a story, but it was never printed.
Well, the PM was always much more liberal.
Yeah, Victor something or other.
Stop?
Huh? No. So the upshot of it all, at that time I worked with the JBC representatives in the area. But the Army cleared the people out. Some of them came back, and they were cleared out again, and they were sent to live in stables in Bamberg. There were other events of a similar nature taking place. Stuttgart at that time, which is not in my area. So except for making the matter public and offering my presence there, what could you do? I appealed to the general and to his adjutant. Yes, and the JBC representative went along. I have it written down. So we appealed, and then we went in. The general was sitting on the floor. Very informal. And I remember I appealed to the adjutant, and the adjutant asked us, is it true that he was the adjutant at the Nuremberg trial? He says, is it true that they killed all those people?
They didn't believe it.
They still didn't believe it, and then the war criminals were being tried there. And I remember that when they were moving the people out at Fürth, the colonel in charge, I appealed to him. And he said, well, these people have it all back. I said, look what these people have been lost, what's been taken away. He says, they'll have it all back. So, business and Jewish reputation. So that...
Now, did you ever work for the Jewish agency?
The Jewish agency? I met Jewish Agency people up at Bergen-Belsen. They worked most closely with the...
What were you doing in Bergen-Belsen?
I was in the British zone later on. Later on.
What year? You went
from the summer of 1946 to the beginning of 1947, I was in Bremen. I had a rather broad experience since I became acquainted with the camp, became acquainted with the military government. I also, in Munich, I had occasion to work, or at least to start to get acquainted with the local Jewish community. The indigenous German Jews who came to me for help. And in Munich, I don't remember seeing Jewish agency personnel.
What about...
In Nuremberg, there was a Sergeant Stone. Have you heard of Sergeant Stone? Who was active in helping people. He was assigned to the trials, and he was busy collecting things to send to people in the camps. And when I got back home, I remember that the Eternal Light program had a program dedicated to the work of Sergeant Stone.
Now, so you had no involvement in Aliyah in any way?
Incidentally, let's see, at the time when they were moving the people out of the camps, yes, there was some involvement up at Bremen.
Which would be...
But not of great significance. But when they were moving the people out of the camp in Fürth, I asked the officer in charge to give the people time to say their prayers, mincha. That they allowed. So religious needs.
Do you have any contact with Jewish organizations?
Which?
World Jewish Congress, American Jewish Committee,
American Jewish Committee was absent.
World
Jewish Congress was absent. The JDC did not come in until around September or October of 1945. They were not admitted. You know that. Their supplies did not start to arrive until sometime in the spring of 46. So people had to fend for themselves. And they did rather, some of them did rather well.
No, but you were never contacted by Jewish organizations, or you never contacted them in order to find out. You see yourself as a representative of the Jewish people there?
Yes, really. Yes, but
organized.
There was JDC. There was JDC. I remember Ort sent some people over.
No, but you never felt there was need to, aside from this time in Nuremberg, to let the American Jewish community know what was going on and just how they might be able to help?
No, there was a Jewish welfare board and there was a joint distribution committee. It wasn't. There may have been others who sought publicity of one kind or another. I didn't.
Now, were there any other incidents where you were called upon to smooth relations between the DPs and the U.S. Army?
Well, there was first a glaring example. And occasionally we would try to get kosher food for the Jews in the prisons. And occasionally a Jewish DP would be arrested and we'd have to go to his sucker. I'd have to serve as an interpreter. And so I would be talking German and English and Hebrew and Jewish. All at the same time to different people, which he did.
Did you ever work with any other chaplains, in terms of your work?
Well, we were all pretty much on our own in our particular locality.
What about collecting guns, ammunition, or money to Palestine?
No.
As
far as Aliyah is concerned, when I was stationed in Bremen, there were some Jews who somehow, instead of arriving in the American zone, if you know there was a British zone, got lost and arrived in Bremen, and we had to get them across from the Bremen enclave, which was American, to the American zone. So there we had to write letters. And I remember getting a letter from one Jew who had come all the way from Siberia. He came with a little boy, and I gave him some chocolate. And he wrote me a letter. This is one item I know. He says, on our whole road, because he came under a false name, and when he got to Southheim, you know Southheim? When he got to Southheim, he wrote me a letter and said, you were the only person on the whole road that was called Ben Adam. So he got across the zone. And on some occasions I tried to... Jews were not allowed to move into the Bremen enclave. And back in 1946, people started ready to go to the States, but only from the American zone. From the British zone, they couldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
So I did try to get some people established in Bremen. Well, in a few cases, we were able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And to get them some residence. But apparently it was difficult.
Now, how would you characterize the work of or the role of the American Jewish chaplain during the period that you were in from December of 1945 until January of 46? How would you characterize the role of the chaplain?
In terms of a primary role instructor?
What was their role?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I would say in general that it was a supportive role. The fact that an Orthodox rabbi like Rabbi Spiro, who was a brother of the chaplain Spiro and was living in Ford, could walk down the street in his attire, together with an American officer, I think would make some impression on the German populace, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
So we could do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the presence of a rabbi in uniform with the tablets, insignia, meant a lot to the people who were in these camps.
So it was very important that a chaplain was there, even if you, at this point.
But I remember walking into the Jewish committee in Frankfurt sometime in early 1946. Or maybe May, and asked them, is there anything I can do for you? Why do you think they asked? Well, you might be able to get us some electric lights. They didn't need anything.
Mm-hmm. Did your presence there was important for them?
The presence, yes, but there was a Jewish representative. This meant so.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything unique about being a chaplain?
About being a chaplain?
No, for them. In other words, you're being a chaplain in uniform.
A Jewish representative in uniform is an officer of the United States Army. And to whom they could turn, sometimes you could get a favor done for them.
Were you familiar in Frankfurt with the GI Council?
I was stationed in Frankfurt.
No, but you
I was stationed in Bad Nauheim for a while.
You never heard of it?
You know what Bad Nauheim?
Sure.
No.
Were there any stories?
I tried to organize GIs, as I told you, we started a YMHA in Munich. But just when I was getting things rolling, I was moved.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about Rabbi Klausner in Munich? Any stories about him, about his effectiveness?
Well, he was very active, of course, but the main effectiveness was the people themselves, and he probably knew them better than I did. But they were very capable and very energetic people. All Litvaks. The leadership was taken over by the Litvaks. I'm not a Litvak, but there was a group. Dr. Greenberg, there was a Greengaus, and Landsberg, and there were others. Men of very high caliber.
Now, was there anything that we've not touched upon that you feel I should...
I don't know. At the end of the year, I was also serving a German Jewish community.
Where was that?
In Bremen. As a rabbi.
It's still part of the
chaplain, but the fact is that most of the people who attended services were DPs and local German Jews.
What survived the war?
We didn't have a camp in the Bremen area. The nearest camp was in Belgium. But we did have a few German Jews and a few displaced persons.
You were able to stay there?
What?
In Bremen?
You
were assigned there?
I was assigned there. There had to be a Jewish chaplain at the port of embarkation.
I see.
And that was the port of embarkation. So that was my assignment. And there was a hospital, and the hospital was moved from Bremen to Bremerhaven. But I didn't move with the hospital. I remained in Bremen with the Jewish community. And we had a sanctuary there, which I inherited from the previous chaplain. And I don't know Morsman.
Sydney,
he's deceased.
Right.
Now, according to, I thought that Morsman had been there at the liberation, but I was looking through the list of chaplains and the dates they served, and he came into Germany not long before I did, so I don't know. And there was a Rabbi Kraft from Delaware. In a very short time, maybe between. I remember in Nuremberg, I visited a very famous rabbi who was in the hospital in Nuremberg, in the city hospital, Rabbi Weinberg. Jacob Weinberg, you heard of him? He was a patient there. At the Nuremberg Seder, we had a cup, a Kiddush cup, that had belonged to the Jewish community of Wrocław, Poland. And that had been part of the collection of Jewish Streifer, which was kept in the Jewish Altersheim in Nuremberg. But while I was in Bremen, we had this very fine, which I already found functioning, very fine palatial building in which were located the Jewish chaplain's offices and the offices of the Jewish Gemeinde and the JDC and the Jewish Relief Unit of Great Britain and Hayat. You asked me about relationships with different organizations. And all the Jewish communities of the British zone used to meet there. And I was sort of for over 6 months, sort of in charge of it all. And on Fridays and Saturdays and holidays, we had services there. And I was preaching in German. Since Jewish GIs, they had to go hunting for them.
Well, at that point, they were interested in other things other than
there weren't too many either. I remember I came to the port of embarkation and announced that the rabbi was there and we were going to have Jewish services. So 2 men showed up. And both of them happened to be from Palestine. Just arrived, American citizens had been drafted.
Do you remember who they were?
Huh?
Do you remember who they were?
One was named Debitz and one was named Shafter.
They're both here now. One is living in Jerusalem. I'm going to interview him shortly. And the other one is in Tel Aviv. That's why I asked you.
Debitz was my assistant.
Debitz was your assistant?
For a while, yeah.
That's interesting. He's here. He's in Jerusalem. By the gun.
How'd you find it? Some names. Michelle was wandering around. He was apparently representing some newspaper. He was just starting to try to learn English.
But he's now in...
Well, he learned English.
In New York.
I know, and he did very well. Very likable personality. But I remember meeting him in Nuremberg and later on in Bad Nauheim. After me and, there was Abe Laskov, did you...
He was a JDC worker.
Yeah. Is he still here?
Abe Laskov is in JDC in New York.
He's still with the JDC?
In New York, yeah.
Because he was living in Palestine, he said.
I know that, but he's
well, now you know it.
Yeah, he's now in
He was in Bad Nauheim as a JDC worker. I was conducting religious services in the synagogue in Bad Nauheim, which was a very lovely resort city. Remember Jacob Eisen? working at JDC, and he had been a chaplain in the Canadian Army. Jacques de Gorter.
How do you spell that?
D-E-G, capital G-O-R-T-E-R. He was a JDC worker at supplies in Bremerhaven. Ginsberg was with the JDC. Rosenfeld.
Sure, that's all right.
Robert Wallheim. Van Damme.
That didn't sound familiar.
There was an interesting case in Raymond, a Jew who was just about to leave for America with accused of raping a German girl. And, American authorities were very concerned about this.
Imagine.
And a rather anti-Semitic girl in their attitude. One of them was a German background himself. So at that time, I think we got Dr. Van Damme to defend. I went to the Jewish advisor in Frankfurt. So
Van Damme?
he's probably still in Germany. Henrik, I think is his name. I went to the JD. I mean, masters were supplied to the DP.
When was this?
The spring of '46. It was a central supply depot, and markers were sent for American forces, and the chaplains all went to Munich to get markers. I too. We supplied the Jewish communities with markers for Passover, and also wine was purchased by the army in North Africa for the troops. So we have to make some Passover for you. Well, I wrote this down. Chocolate.
The only thing the JDC supplied was chocolate.
For pregnant women. The main supplies didn't arrive until April '46. They did supply workers. Many of whom couldn't even talk Jewish. I made a note here that in Bergen-Belsen, the Palestinians lived with the people. The American workers lived with the military personnel. And the English workers, the Jewish relief unit of Great Britain, lived in the camp, but it was the Jewish agency, the people who actually lived with them. Arrested for rape, I went to Rabbi Bernstein's office, to Rabbi Grobman, and I got no help at that time. The Jewish community in Bremen was at 17 Osterdive. That's where we had our center with the JDC and OSTER, and we were there to give help. You remember the Celtic program?
July 46.
Yeah, so there were many who came through Bremen, and we helped them. And when I say we helped them, the main help actually came from the local Jewish community. And of course, then there were Jews who were coming up. In 1946, there were Jews on their way to America through Bremerhaven. And they were at a camp, a staging area. And they would come for little things, nothing very significant. They were all loaded with cameras and diamonds, and you know all about that. So. His name I don't remember. It was a typically Irish name. He was in charge of all the chaplains in Europe. And he had a reputation as the son of a gun.
Kiernan?
Kiernan, I'll let you know.
Did you ever have any contact with him?
I think that my assignment to the military government in Munich was either due to a mistake on his part, because there was some question whether there was a vacancy for a Jewish chaplain in that particular type of a regiment.
Mm-hmm.
So they found a vacancy for me in a general hospital. So I was with the 116th General Hospital and then later with the 121st General Hospital. So they didn't know where to put a Jewish chaplain. So Klausner was with the 91st or the 92nd.
Could have even been in the 116th, I don't
know. No, he wasn't.
Evacuation,
No, there was a 92nd, I think it was 92nd, maybe 93rd. But I think 92nd General Hospital in Munich. That was his assignment. So they found a similar assignment for me in Nuremberg. And then later on in Bremerhaven. Who warned me in Munich. The first person, very nice chap. He came and picked me up when I arrived.
What was his name?
Hutchins.
How would you spell it?
Hutchins. Later he was very angry that I didn't follow his advice.
Do you know his first name?
No. For sure.